The other day I was talking about how if we try to study before we act, then we can get lost in an infinite loop of simulating scenarios that we've never been in, right? So the example I gave was to catch up. Then we're going to go into how relevance is actually one of the critical forces in how we navigate reality. Something that's sort of under discussed, but it's everything, right? It is everything, especially if you're an intelligent person and you're suffering with procrastination, analysis paralysis, all these things, and you're studying infinitely, you're like, man, where does theory stop and where does action start, right? We're going to learn that in this video. So as I mentioned a couple of days ago, or yesterday in real time, we were talking about how you can infinitely study how to ride a bike, but never learn how to do it, right? Never actually know how to do it. You could go to the PhD level of riding a bike and never know how to do it. And so to do a recap of that, we discussed there are two intelligent systems. Well, there are really three, but we'll stick to them, right? So actually, let's do it like this. So we have what I call the adaptive intelligence system, and it's responsible for real-time responses. So these are what's called skills, where you have to move your body in a really specific way to get it done. So if you're just learning to ride the bicycle, you may end up studying, researching, analyzing, right? Analyzing old data. So you are simulating what it would be like to ride a bicycle. Whether that's through a book, whether that's through a picture, whether that's through a YouTube video, it is a simulation. It is not real. So you're simulating what it would be like to ride a bicycle. And you're imagining, right? It's another word that's more commonly used. It's imaginary. You go, wait, well, how can it be imaginary if bicycles actually exist? The imagination simply means that we generate an image that is not physically present. Imagination does not mean not real. Imagination means simulated version of something. Not physical. Not real. It can't not be real because it exists. If it's not real, then it doesn't exist. So if we imagine, that means it exists, but it's not in a physicalized form. So a simulation in your head, a thought, is not in a physicalized form, but it's real. And so we talked about how what we call the simulated self is a version of us that we have in mind that we want to be. And each time we read a book, we do this, we what's called improve the simulated self. And so it's just imagining, whoa, this guy's getting even better in my head, man. So the actual self is here, imagining this version of himself. And every time he reads a book, right, the simulated self gets even better. Oh my, well, what if I put some muscles on him? What if my simulated self had a muscle and he had a big chest and the girls loved him and he was rich? And each book, each course, each video just keeps improving that simulated self. And it can get so severe that you don't notice time going by. And nothing in your actual reality has changed, but everything has changed in your simulated reality because you're busy preparing for actuality. However, this simulated self is stuck in analysis. That's where analysis paralysis even comes from as a concept. So, hopefully that caught you back up. So, if that's the case, that means that all skills require adaptive intelligence, which can only be acquired through your hands. And I don't mean literally your hands, right? I mean through motion. right? It's learning how to move the body in a particular way, right? Or you could say move things in space in a particular way, which is what the brain does, right? If you're playing chess, what you're simulating is not necessarily a bunch of physical motion, but you're simulating the pieces moving around through space. And it's like I'm simulating all the movements. So even within simulations, movements are king. But when it comes to adaptive intelligence, the real life motion is the master. So if you want to go from simulation to reality or simulation to actuality, then it must require motion. You must learn how to move your body in accordance with the version of yourself that you want to be. You cannot visualize it into reality. You can get close and get clear with visualization, but you must close the circuit, the electrical circuit, with motion. You must ground it in motion. So we won't go and bore you with all that for a different time. And so we have the simulated, we have the actual, and we have the adaptive, and we have the analytical, right? So we're going to erase this here. So the question is, how does relevance, why is this relevant, right? How does relevance fit into all this, right? We know analysis is useful for old data or memories or the past, where the adaptive is for the present. So and you can only analyze something in the past. You cannot analyze something you've never been exposed to. So if I say, think of something you've never seen before, you can't think of it. Even if you thought of something just now, it's a mixture of something you've seen before. So you cannot simulate something you've never been exposed to. I say, imagine what my brother looks like. You imagined a version of myself and you manipulated it, right? But if I said, imagine what your great-grandchild 4,000 years from now will look like, your brain will start to frizz, because that's too far. It's too much to simulate, too many variables to account for. You're like, what will humanity even look like in 4,000 years? And your brain overloads. That's because it requires memories, but 4,000 years in the future, it doesn't have memories to build the future on. So it works on the past. Simulations work on past experiences. What have you been exposed to up to this point? Adaptation works in real time. However, if you wanted to develop, let's say you wanted to learn how to ride the bike, get good with women, make money, whatever that may be, get in the gym. If you go, okay, well, I know I'm going to watch 15 hours of YouTube videos before I take one action. What that does is it causes you to generate a simulation. And how do we know it's a simulation? Because you've never done it. You have no data, you have no experience. And so it's running a simulation on the past that you don't have. It's running a simulation on a past you don't have. So the question is, if there's no past, then whose past am I studying? You're studying somebody else's past. So when you go through knowledge, you're studying someone else's past. The issue with that is that you have to then go and assume that that person actually coded into that book the fundamental truths of reality. And those are called principles. And this is where relevance gets necessary. These are called principles. These are that which do not change. That which do not change. I don't know why I even said it in that way. I sound like an old school Englishman. Right? That which does not change. Right? And so the principle, this would be the equivalent of the atom. Right? We're going to do an old school atom drawing. Right? The atom is a principle of the universe, because everything is made of it and there's nowhere it's not, except, the field. But for the most part, every bit of matter is made of an atom. So that's a principle. However, you have the principle and you have what's called a pathway. So principles never change and they're singular. Whereas pathways are, I was going to say, there's a word I'm looking for, but I was just going to say there are multiple pathways. Okay. There's a word that clicked with this that I couldn't think of. Singular and but multiple. So we have one singular principle and multiple pathways. So that which does not change and variations of that thing. So we're going to make an example of this right now. So we have the same atom drawing. And so we're going to create same pattern of an atom. But now we have a different variation of it. We're going to do that again. So same fundamental structure, different variation because we altered one feature of it, the color. So why is that relevant? It's because if you're not careful about whose past you study, their knowledge, then you may end up studying their pathway and not the principle. You study their pathway and not the principle. And so if you study their pathway, you're going to be trapped in their past rather than creating from the principle and making your own future. Right? Never follow someone's pathway, learn from the principle. So if the person is not aware of that, they'll write a story of their pathway. And you'll try to follow that pathway thinking it's a principle. The story I always give of this is that imagine a guy who's good with women and he has a friend and this guy has a particular blue nose that he always wears when he's talking to women, like a clown nose. Imagine a clown nose, but for some reason he goes around, he likes wearing this clown nose and he's like, hey, da, 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 right? And he's just charismatic and going around, and for some reason women love that. They're all laughing, and so the friend goes, that's it. That's why I'm a virgin, right? I don't have a blue nose. And so he goes to the store and purchases a blue nose. And so he's going over to the girls and it's not working. And he's like, what the hell? He tried to follow his friend's pathway, not understanding the principle of what attracts women. And this is very common online today, right? You usually hear this is my truth. This is my truth. No, that's your perspective of the truth. That's your perspective of truth, not the truth. The truth never changes. Your perspective of the truth changes. Your pathway towards the truth or away from the truth changes, right? But that's a whole other tangent. But that's really important because many things online are pathways that have been mistaken as principles. So, coming back full circle, if you wanted to learn how to ride the bike or get good with women and you may be studying 15 hours of somebody's pathway and never learn the principle. And why is that relevant? Because now you're running a simulation of somebody else's unique pathway. And then you try to force yourself into their pathway. But how do you know whether it's somebody's pathway that you're mirroring or you're mirroring the principle of the truth? The only way that can be known is through you taking action. So if somebody says this is how the bike is ridden and it can't be done any other way, how do you know if that's the pathway to truth? I mean the principle of truth, or the pathway, his particular expression of the truth? How do you know? Well, you have to try it. You have to try it and go, oh, okay, actually this is a way it can be done. And you get to the same principle in a different path. Same principle in a different pathway. So when you go and you're trying to study something and you have a massive gap. So let's say this is a subject you're looking to study. I'm gonna give a real example. Say this is physics. I had this issue. At the time I was working on a project to see if human archetypes, the patterns between each person is mappable. And at the time I was gonna go from the ontology of just existence itself all the way down to human behavior, which was a hell of a task. And so in order to do so, I was like, okay, well, let's start with the most abstract body of knowledge in terms of what's verifiable. And so physics obviously had to come up. However, physics has so many different dimensions to it that I found myself watching YouTube videos on God knows everything under the earth. And so I was over here in the quantum. Then I was over here in general, I'll just put GR. And over here in advanced math and all of these different places. And I started to get overwhelmed because I broke the relevance law. I broke the relevance law and I didn't even know it. So this is a beautiful lesson. So sharing this with you, hopefully you don't make the same mistake. These different areas all have relevance depending on what problem I'm looking to solve. However, and this is the key, if I don't determine or clarify what the problem is I'm looking to solve first, then I won't know where to focus my attention. So to make this a bit more grounded, imagine if we change the subject to make this more practical. And let's say I wanted to get better at eating, right? So food. So this is me, right? And I'm like, okay, I need to get better at eating, right? Things need to change. So I go, okay, I'm eating donuts every day. Right, let's say 4 a day. Right. I'm eating 4 donuts a day and I'm like, okay, I know I need to do something different to lose this weight. So I'm going to take the academic approach to it. I'm going to go and learn everything I need to know before I change anything, right? So let's say that I have, and I don't know, let's say I have, at my current state with the overweightness, 20 more years to live if I don't change my body. So I have 20 years to live. I don't know that. There's a deadline. And so I go, you know what? I'm gonna watch some YouTube videos on it. But here's the catch. I have to go about it exactly like how all of us go about it when we're learning something new, which means I can't eat until I'm ready. I can't eat until I'm ready. So the question is, what ready? What do you mean when you're ready? It means when I feel ready that I know enough that I can safely make a choice of what I'm going to eat. So that's no different than the example I just gave, right? Okay, the quantum physics. Okay, I don't think I know enough to start running this experiment. So I need to know everything to know I know enough, right? And so for this person, they can't eat until they know everything about food. So they go over here to the vegetables. They got the fruits, the meats, the other things, right? The marijuana. I gotta enjoy this thing because trust and believe I'll be bored up here, y'all. But other things, right? I have a bunch of legumes and all the things. The dirt, depending on where you live, right? So they have to learn all of this before they can make a new choice. And so they go, okay, I'm gonna read my first book. This book is called The Magic of Food. There's probably a book called that. The Magic of Food. And they go, okay, when I'm done reading The Magic of Food, then I'm gonna make a new choice. And so, The Magic of Food took them, let's say they're a fast reader, and it's like 3 days to read. And after 3 days, they realize, oh shoot, there's a Magic of Food book too. And so they buy that, and it takes them about 4 days to get through that. And then we have The Magic of Food. Guess what it is? Book 3. Now we got 8 days. But here's the problem. Time's are ticking. And they can't eat until they're ready. So it's been 8 days since they've eaten. So it seems like their weight loss strategy is going to be, or that's my weight loss strategy, because remember, this was me. My weight loss strategy is going to be starving myself to death reading. Right? It's going to be fasting myself down, apparently. So what's the problem with this? The problem with this is that, one, when would this person know enough information to take their first imperfect action? How would this person be able to tell this is the time to try a piece of broccoli? This is the time to drink a little more water. How much knowledge would they need to acquire? How much of this person's past would they need to analyze before they took the action? That's something to think about. And so relevance comes into play, because now if I go, I'm going to pick one area that I'm going to focus on. I heard a really good fruit diet exists to lose weight. And so now they don't have to pay attention to these. And so they can go, okay, what's the fruit diet? They get just enough. Let's give you a rule of thumb. Let's say it takes no more than an hour. If it's over an hour before the first action, it's too long. And even that's pushing it, to be fair. Let's say just enough, more than an hour, then they have to act. Real-time response. They have to develop the skill of eating properly. Eating properly has psychological components, but is biopsychological or psychobiological. It's not one or the other. The systems are intertwined. The body affects the brain affects the body or mind, right? So it cannot be in isolation. Their movements must change for their brain to change. Their movements must change for their brain to change. It's a very big blind spot when it comes to simulations, because simulations change the order of reality within the person's mind, but it doesn't alter anything here. In actuality, we talked about, right? Simulation to actuality. And as I mentioned yesterday, or whenever it was that you saw that video, if you did see it, the purpose, and this is something that's often misunderstood in manifestational spaces and whatnot, the purpose of a simulation is not for you to become the simulation. The purpose of a simulation is for the simulation to become you. The purpose of the simulation is not for you to become the simulation must become you. And the only way to ground that simulation, that imaginary electrical energy, into reality is motion. In the present, not studying the past forever, simulating the past, thinking that I'll simulate the past so much that I'll come into the present. You're not simulating the future. How do we know? Because you've never been to the future. Even if you're running a simulation, it's always in the present. And it's always a simulation of the past. It's just a modified version of the past. And so even your future that you're imagining is a modified version of right now. It's just, if right now could be better, I would change this. I'd be in a bigger house. I'd be making more money. I'd have 10 wives. That's the modified future for you, right? But it's still the past. And this is very important to understand, because that is how cycles develop. You get stuck in the loop because relevance was not defined before the study began. What am I here to get done? What do I want to be able to do, not what I want to know? Now, if you want to know stuff, that's fine as well, right? Like, that's what movies are. That's what Harry Potter and the stories and all those things. Those aren't things we do anything with. Those are simulations we run to entertain ourselves, right? Anime, all those things are simulations we enjoy. So running simulations is fun. But if your objective is to get a result, make more money, get better with women, have a better body, is it to have better relationships with your family? All those things and most social things are skills, not simulations. Nobody, when you've offended them, or you went to the girl you wanted to speak with, and this is from anybody can benefit from this, but I do have a bigger male audience. So I'm going to use relevance to things that they can relate to. But if you're going to approach a woman and your social skills weren't up to par, do you think she's going to stop? You're going to say, "Oh, give me 1 second. Let me check this YouTube video. Let me remember what the guy said I was supposed to say." Right? She's, "Oh, well, take your time. I got about 5 minutes." And then you see the video and you go, "Okay, that's what he said to say. Hey, what's up?" Right? And now you as the man has said, "Hey, what's up?" And she's going, "Oh, great. I'm good." And he's like, "Okay, give me 1 moment. Let me check the next thing he said I was supposed to say." Notice, running a simulation, then acting. Running a simulation, then acting. Running a simulation, then acting. But social situations are skill-based. It is you're instinctively knowing what to do based on what you've practiced. It's knowing what to do based on what you've practiced. That's why a baby can adapt even language very quickly. Knowing what to do, knowing what to say, and knowing how to say based on what you've been exposed to and what you've practiced. So do realize social skills, making money in business, whatever the thing may be, especially if it requires real-time interaction, sales, everything in that dimension is an adaptive intelligence issue. This is useful when you're refining your experiences, but it's not going to get you skills. So you can never read yourself into being a good bike rider. And so then the question becomes, if it doesn't work for a bike, what skill does it work for? So it's critical to know the relevance, what's the objective of what you're doing before you even start studying. And then constrain the study as much as you can. And then take action, then analyze your memories. And that's all you need to know. Right? Hopefully you understand how to no longer live in the simulation of your memories. Right? Because many people been hurt, went through a lot of awful things, and now they're stuck in the simulation of the past. And every person in the present looks like a person in their past, even though they've never met them. And trust, I can relate. So hopefully that was helpful. Hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.